I remember the doctors saying to me, "What do you want to do as a career?" And I instantly said, "I want to be a zookeeper. I want to work with animals." And they instantly went, "You've got no chance of doing that, because the way your feet are, you'll just be in so much pain and discomfort day in, day out, because obviously zookeepers get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and don't get home till like 5, 6 o'clock at night, and then on their feet constantly feeding, cleaning the animals and looking after them." So they said, like, you'd have to look for like a desk job or an office job where you're sitting down for the most of the time. And for me, growing up, as I said, with my grandparents, just loving nature, experiencing everything to do with the natural world, I just couldn't accept that. So luckily I ignored their advice, and I've gone on to have almost over 12 to 13 year career now, working with animals, traveling the world, filming wildlife.
Hello, and welcome back to Straw Plat Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Cole. So today I'm joined by Ryan Eddowes, a zoologist, wildlife filmmaker, and disability advocate whose life and career have been shaped by a deep love of the natural world and his experience of disability. So Ryan has worked to challenge assumptions about who can take part in conservation and to encourage a more accessible and inclusive sector. So today we'll be talking about his journey, the barriers he has encountered, and what he hopes to change. So first of all, Ryan, thank you so much for your time and welcome. So you start
No.
by telling us a little bit about, well, where did your love of wildlife begin and a bit of your background.
Yeah, so my background started with my grandparents. So I was brought up by my nan and granddad. So my granddad was called Bert and my nan was called Carol. And my granddad introduced me to the fantastic world of fauna. So he used to take me bird watching. We used to look for insects and snails and all sorts of things in the back garden, look for mammals and reptiles. So although he didn't know much about natural history at the time, we sort of learned together. So if there's something we didn't know, or we didn't know what it was, if there was a certain bug what we couldn't identify, we went to the local library and went and researched it. And my nan, she introduced me to the flora side. So my nan was a fantastic gardener. She loved her back garden. She had wildflowers everywhere. She had shrubs. She had flowers themselves and trees. And she, again, didn't really know much about natural history. And I was astounded, really, if I think about it now, looking back. She used to know all the common names of these plants and the scientific names. And to be fair, I didn't even know at the time, obviously being a kid, I didn't know things had so many names to one thing. So it was quite an interesting start to my life. And from that point on, we used to go down to Weymouth a lot and along the Jurassic Coast. And my granddad always used to take me along the beaches, and we used to try and find fossils and go hunting for stuff like that and go rock pooling. So I always had a lot of connections with nature. And I'll always remember the one year, I think we've traveled along the whole coast, going to like Lyme Regis, Charmouth, Lulworth Cove, and we went into all the natural history museums along the coast. And it was just a fantastic time. Absolutely loved it. Seeing the prehistoric life and then looking at the sort of life that's around today. While my nan was going shopping and looking at clothes, me and my granny was going and looking at all these fantastic things. And then from there, really, I sort of went off and did my animal care diploma at Rob Aston College, where I learned how to become a zookeeper, an animal care, and animal handler. And then from there, I went off to university and did my zoology with herpetology degree with Bangor University. And I got to travel the world. I got to see all these amazing species from Africa to Tenerife to Corfu. It was just a fantastic time. And I hope to do a lot more traveling with my new prosthetic.
Of course. And would you mind telling us a little bit about the history of your disability?
Mhm. So I was born with bilateral talipes, also known as clubfoot. So basically, clubfoot is where your feet turn inwards and then downwards. So it's like a funny sort of angle. And the thing with clubfoot, it's a very common lower limb condition. So between 1 to 2 people in 1,000 babies are born with this condition. So it's very common. And the thing with it now is that if a baby is born with clubfoot, they can go through various different surgeries and stuff like that, but it's more non-invasive surgeries. So it's something called the Ponseti method, where they mold the feet using plaster casts over a few months or even a couple of years in order to set the foot in the correct positioning. Now, unfortunately, I was 2 years too early to have this treatment. So I had to go through operations. So I think I had about 4 or 5 operations. I had my tendons lengthened because, again, another effect of clubfoot is sometimes you have limb difference. So I think mine was 2 and a bit centimeters difference. I was obviously sort of limping a lot when I was younger, and I spent pretty much all of my childhood in primary school and secondary school in a wheelchair because I was constantly having operations to try and correct the clubfoot. But these operations, although they was trying to correct the shape of it, the thing with clubfoot, it always wants to go back to how it used to be. So I know when I was born and I had my first operation, I had like loads of bolts through my legs to try and keep them in that same sort of position. But as I say, like that condition just keeps on making you it keeps on wanting to go back to its original position. So, and then when I was about 13 years old, I went to Birmingham's Children's Hospital, and I was met by experts from Australia, India, America, and obviously the UK. And they saw me as a real special case because my clubfoot was quite severe at that age. And they gave me 3 options. So the first option was to have another operation, which would try to correct the foot position, but it would mean I would have reduced mobility. So to me, I didn't think that was really an option. The second was to leave it, and then by the age of 25 and 30, I would be wheelchair bound. I'm currently 30 years old, so that sort of gives you the impression of that. And the third was to have an amputation. Now, as a 13-year-old kid, I was like, whoa, what would that entail? Like, how would I live my life? And obviously, being at school already with operations, I was severely bullied. So to have an amputation it'd be, just an awful experience at school. So, as you can see, I went for the second option, and I didn't have any amputation at the time or other operations. So I just left in. I was hoping that within, the next 10, 15 years after that point, that medical medical amazement would happen and there'd be a cure for clubfoot. But unfortunately, there's just never been one. The only other one was where you could have your bones fused together, but then that can also lead to infection and then also an amputation. So it didn't really mean a lot to me at that time. But I remember the doctors saying to me, "What do you want to do as a career?" And I instantly said, "I want to be a zookeeper. I want to work with animals." And they instantly went, "You've got no chance of doing that because the way your feet are, you'll just be in so much pain and discomfort day in, day out." Because obviously, zookeepers get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and don't get home till like 5, 6 o'clock at night, and then on their feet, constantly feeding, cleaning the animals, and looking after them. So they said like you'd have to look for like a desk job or an office job where you're sitting down for the most of the time. And for me, growing up, as I said, with my grandparents, just loving nature, experiencing everything to do with the natural world, I just couldn't accept that. So luckily, I ignored their advice, and I've gone on to have almost over 12 to 13-year career now, working with animals, traveling the world, filming wildlife. And obviously, as time has gone on, my condition has worsened. So access to the natural world has become a little bit more difficult. And 2 years ago now, on the 20th of June 2024, I opted for a below the knee amputation of my right leg. And for 28 years of my life, as I said, I was in immense pain. There was days where I couldn't stand or walk. There was days I had to have off work because I couldn't physically walk, or I had to crawl to the toilet on many occasions because how severely painful it was, because it's, the pains in your ankle joints and stuff like that. It was very stiff when I was walking. But the last 2 years, touch wood, I've had zero pain having this amputation. So it's actually gave me a completely new lease of life. It's actually hard to remember life now when I had 2 legs. It's so strange to actually see pictures of myself with 2 legs, and I'm like, but that life was just so painful. And now, obviously, wearing a prosthetic, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. There is days where it gets sore and I get blisters and stuff like that, but I'd rather that than what I had before. But I still have clubfoot on my left foot, but now I wear a brace. It's called a coyote brace, which basically tries to keep the foot in the same position, and hopefully, touch wood, I won't have to have another amputation on my left leg, but there's a chance. I don't know what the time frame would be. Could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be next year. I don't know. I dare to be next year, but there's a chance I might have to have another amputation. So I might end up being a double amputee. But I know if that does happen, I know what life has been like as an amputee. So I know that even being a double amputee, I will still be able to live the life that I want.
Yes, and given all of these credible challenges, how have you found it pursuing your life and career in conservation?
I mean, I mean, for the last sort of year or so, my sort of career is like, you know, skyrocketed. The amount of interviews and podcasts like this I'm doing is fantastic, because the essence of being disabled now. I mean, before I've always been trying to become a wildlife presenter. That's been my main aim for the last 10 years. And the one thing I've always experienced when I had my two legs and I had the club feet, because club feet again is classed as a hidden disability. If you were to look at me, you wouldn't believe I had a disability. And I had people from all different industries tell me, even in conservation and wildlife media, that um, I'm not disabled enough to become a wildlife presenter, which to me was baffling, because obviously I've always thought, if you want to become a wildlife presenter, it's more to do with your knowledge, your passion, not your physical ability. I mean, I know wildlife presenting has always been one of those where you see adventurers going off into the wild and trekking up mountains and talking about animals in the deep blue sea and all this sort of stuff. So it's very adventurous stuff, but I can't see why someone with a disability can't also achieve this. So it's been my ambition really to sort of break down those barriers and try and prove that people with physical or hidden disabilities can achieve these things. And when I had my below the knee amputation, I started to realize actually now I am more physically disabled. So now surely is the time for me to try and do more things in wildlife media and conservation, and see if I can start changing perceptions, start getting rid of that taboo subject of disability and not being able to achieve things. So like I said, the last year or so, the amount of projects that I'm doing, the amount of filming I'm doing, and TV appearances that I'll be coming up shortly, it's been fantastic. So I'm now able to be at the forefront of this and be on TV, being on the screen, doing podcasts, doing blogs, and showcasing that people with disabilities can actually do these jobs. Not necessarily just wildlife presenting, but any sort of job really. If an organisation is able to support people with disabilities, the amount of I always think about this: the amount and talent of disabled people that have been missed over the years because companies haven't been able to give them access to the business, or can't deal with their needs. I just think the amount of people that they could have supported and made fantastic workers, but because again people see disabilities this subject of we can't talk about that. We don't know how to approach this subject with you or about this sort of thing. So it's become quite a scaremongering type topic. But I do believe the more people that are on television, for example, or in the media representing as people with disabilities, I think the sort of notion of that taboo then sort of disappears.
What sort of changes can organizations be making to help provide this more inclusive environment? And perhaps even, I appreciate what you mean about there's a sort of a sense of scaremongering and people are a little bit hesitant and afraid that they might cause offense or that they feel that they're ignorant. How do you think that organizations can adapt to that and maybe just be a little bit more grown up about it and just accept the fact that, got a
Yeah.
talented guy here and, well, a talented group of people that have been overlooked?
Well, at the end of the day, we are still human.
Right.
We are still people. Just because we're in a wheelchair, or we're on crutches, or we've got prosthetic legs, doesn't make us some, non-human being. We are humans at the end of the day. So being adult and talking to each other is part and parcel of being human. We are there to communicate with each other. We are all from the animal kingdom. Animals experience disabilities. This one thing that I wanted do more of is talk about animals with disabilities and do films on those. And I'll be going up to Yorkshire, I think, in a couple of months' time to do some filming with animals with disabilities and showcasing a presenter with a disability talking about animals with disabilities. Again, to try and showcase that it's all out there. I mean, we get so many ideas and so many things from nature in terms of, like, for example, like bird feathers with the barbs that became Velcro. We get so many things. So, like, why can't we see animals the same as we do humans? And for me, in terms of businesses, it's not necessarily everyone thinks, oh, if you employ someone with a disability, they're gonna, you know, you've got to transform the whole business to accommodate them. It's nothing to do with that, really. You haven't got to spend thousands or even millions of pounds at that what they think is going to happen. It's just simple changes like wheelchair access. That's should really be a given nowadays in any sort of business, because a lot of people, I mean, the one thing I'm part of is I'm a global ambassador for Purple Tuesday. And Purple Tuesday is an organization that helps organizations make companies and businesses more accessible for people with disabilities. And what a lot of people forget about, we are a major contributor of money for the economy. So if you are denying customers who are disabled into your business, you will lose revenue. So having just that, wider door, or that wheelchair accessible pathway, or having elevators, or having just places to sit down, it's just simple changes. And it's also, as I was saying, just about being human. It's not, if you're employing someone with a disability or you're working with someone with a disability, you don't treat them any different than you would someone who's able-bodied. Or I'm not asking any business or manager to know everything about every single disability. I don't know. Probably everyone else doesn't know. It's impossible. There's so many disabilities and conditions out there. But what I always request and always sort of strive for is, if there's a manager or business that are employing people with disabilities, it's having that time to listen to that person. What is it about their disability that they just need that little bit more assistance with? And I've experienced it before. I've experienced people discriminated about disability, and I never say like, "Oh, I'm going to go and sue you now for that sort of stuff." I'm going to educate you now on how to be a little bit more inclusive on this. And that's what we need to do. It's more about subtle education. It's just making people aware of things. Because, as I said, it's impossible to know everything about every single condition. No one's going to know all that. But it's just having those conversations. It's just making sure, you are being human at the end of the day, and you're being nice to those people. Same as, people with disabilities, we will treat people who are able-bodied exactly the same as us. We're not going to treat you any differently. I mean, I've experienced things where people have said, "Are you sure you're able to do that?" And it's like, can you let me do it first? And then if I'm struggling, I will let you know. Because again, it's that human connection, that human conversation. We can communicate with each other. There's no like wall between able-bodied and disabled people. We can talk to each other, and it's that, I think, like I say, it's that taboo scaremongering thing where people sort of believe that talking to someone who's disabled is going to impact you in some way, or it's just those conversations really what need to happen. I think more of those need to happen. And like I say, having people on TV and in social media and stuff like that are showcasing what it is like to be disabled and what it's like to go outside and experience it. Because I'm all about advocating for people with disabilities, physical or hidden, to access nature, because nature is so essential to our mental health and physical well-being. And it, I just believe it doesn't matter what background you're from. If you're from a religious background, a race background, gender, disability, it does not matter. Nature should be for everyone. Nature is not an exclusive thing for certain individuals or certain groups. It is inclusive for everyone. And that's what I've always advocated for. I just think nature should be a resource that everyone can have access to, and should never be denied that.
And what were the first steps or the first moment when you finally broke into working in conservation? Was it a particular group or organization who gave you that opportunity?
Oh, good question. So obviously when I was at university, and I was studying my zoology with a botany degree. There was a company called the AWDF, which is the Atlantic Whale and Dolphin Foundation. I'm not sure if they're still running anymore, but that was the first sort of conservation organisation I went with abroad, and they was there to educate the public on the whale watching boats about obviously cetaceans, your whales and your dolphins, about the conservation of them in the sea. And I'll always remember being on the whale watching boats, educating the public that were coming from all over the globe to see these species in the wild. And it sort of gave me a real insight into how conservation works. It's all about education. It's all about making connections with people. It's understanding people's views and going, okay, that's your opinion, that's your view. This is what conservation does. And then if they want to change their opinion on it, fantastic. But it's not about forcing information down people's throats or saying you must change because of this. Conservation is all about networking, communicating, and understanding human nature. Because the more you understand the way people behave, the easier it is then to pass that information over in a subtle way that allows them to actually go away and think about it. Because I know there was like I can't remember what the place was called. There was like a zoo or park that held captive whales and dolphins just up the coast, and you'd see people come onto the boats with the caps on. So they've obviously gone to visit the captive ones, and then they're coming to see the wild ones. And it's not necessarily saying like, "Oh, you shouldn't have gone there." It's like, what made you go and see those, and there you come to see the ones in the wild? What is it? What did you find fascinating then, not fascinating here, and so on and so forth. And it's just having those subtle questions of finding that information out. And again, honestly, just sitting there and having a conversation with someone. You could sit there for like 2-3 hours sometimes talking to people, and by the end of it, okay, if they might not change their mind, that's fine. But at least you've attempted that, and you gave them the information. And if they want to change, perfect.
You touched on some of the work that you're involved with. Do you mind telling us? I'm not sure how developed it is, but that work you're doing with disabled animals sounds incredibly interesting. Up the coast, I think you said. Would you mind telling me a little bit more about that? And some
So
of
then,
the.
question,
So,
sorry.
sorry, you said you're working with, or you're doing a video, or working involved with disabled animals, and of course, you as a
Oh
disabled
yeah,
presenter. There's that sort of interesting link.
yes.
Yeah,
So
would you want to tell us a bit more about that?
yeah, so I've had this idea for many many years now. I mean, the sort of idea was that when I went to Wild Screen in 2024, I was literally in my wheelchair with the amputation. I didn't have the prosthetic at the time, so I was going around the venue in the wheelchair, and I sort of realised at the time actually there's watching natural history programs, you never really see anything to do with animals with disabilities, really. There's been the occasional thing like the Bionic Corvette, where you create mechanical things or prosthetics for dogs. But there's never really been anything in natural history, like wilds and stuff like that, or farms or zoos or anything like that. There might be the occasional thing at like Monkey World on the television and stuff like that, but it wasn't really going into any in-depth conversation. And it was never really to do with presenters either. It was always able-bodied presenters talking about these animals with disabilities. And obviously, not necessarily like able-bodied people don't have that connection with animals. Of course they do. But do they have that connection going through the same process of operations and rehabilitation and pain therapy and all that sort of stuff? So I just thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if there'd be a wildlife presenter who's got a disability talking about an animal with the same disability or similar disability, and having that connection with them, seeing how they cope with it, and then how I've coped with it, and see what's the same, what's different, and sort of take a little bit away from how animals cope and adapt and survive and evolve with these, because disability has been a thing for millions of years. It's always been here. It's always been about. It's just been in different forms and variations. So it's interesting to see how animals can adapt to disability and see how humans can do it. But I'll always remember, because obviously with wildlife filmmaking and presenting, there's obviously a lot to do with disability. So there's a lot to do with diversity and inclusion. And there was a program, I think it was called Matriarchs, and it was a production by Natural Geographic, and it was all done and presented by women, because there was a what they was trying to do is influence more women in the industry. And I just thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if there was also a wildlife series presented and filmed and done about animals and people with disabilities? Wouldn't that be fantastic? I thought that'd be another sort of groundbreaking sort of idea for that sort of area, and it would really emphasize the connection between human and animal on a completely different scale. So I don't know. I mean, it's not fully confirmed on the days I'm going up to film, but I'm hoping to go and film some animals on a farm that have got a prosthetic exactly the same as me. And I'm just really curious as to how, there's some days I get up and I'm just like, I don't think I can go for this, because wearing a prosthetic, a lot of people don't realize you actually use up at least 30% more energy than someone who doesn't have the prosthetic. So it is very, very exhausting to walk with a prosthetic, especially if you're a double amputee. I think it's more like 70 to 80% more energy you use. So I'm interested to see what an animal does, how they cope, how they get up every morning and just carry on like nothing's nothing's going on. So I just want to see what happens really, and sort of, I mean, it's not going to be scripted or anything like that. I'm just going to go and film with Ruth, who's a fantastic filmmaker, and she's just done a little film on me, which is coming out in a couple of months' time, hopefully, about my connection with nature and my disability and my journey through life with a condition, and using nature as that sort of that crutch, really to support myself. So yeah, it will be interesting, but I just hope to see what happens in real time rather than scripting everything.
And what advice would you give to a young disabled person who loves conservation, but feels limited by their circumstances?
I mean, it obviously does vary on what condition you have, but at the same time, go and do it. That's all I can say is, if you listen to every person's opinion, you will never ever do anything. The amount of people that have said to me, "You can't do that. You won't be able to achieve this." If in fact, I love it when people say it, because I'll go out the next day and go and do it. And I would say that to anyone. Don't listen to everyone. Obviously, you're going to have medical professionals or professionals in the industry that will, been doing it for a long, long time, and they'll say, like, you might struggle with this. By all means, take on people's feedback and advice. I'm not saying ignore everyone, because that's the wrong thing to do. But it's having that understanding of your own condition. I've had obviously many, many years to understand and live with my condition, so I know what I can and can't do. And I always try to push that boundary where I can, because it's important to do that, but it's important to remember as well, like, there is occasions if you do push yourself too much, you can obviously seriously injure yourself. So you've got to have that understanding before you go out and do these things. But I fully believe that people know this anyway, and you know I just want people to see other people on screen, and in social media and in conservation, who are doing these amazing jobs, but with a disability. I just think the more people that can go and do this, the better, because again, it breaks down barriers, it gets people talking, it stops this taboo subject, and it really encourages that new talent, as I mentioned before, to come through. Because we see things from a different perspective as well. I mean, not for films and conservation, we see challenges on a daily basis. We have to go through different things on a daily basis, accessing buildings, going to different places, traveling the world with a disability. We have to problem solve on the daily. So we would be fantastic on a production or in an organization. If you've got a problem, I'm sure someone with a disability will be able to solve it for you, because we problem solve every single day. So we would be, you know, such an important employee for whoever would employ someone with a disability, because people with learning needs like dyslexia see things from a whole new perspective. And like I say, people with disabilities as well, and people with learning needs, we are essential to these businesses, because like I say, we have different perspectives, we can see things from different point of views, and we can bring that talent, we can bring those views and opinions, and hopefully make the business more sustainable, economical, financial, whatever you want to call it, I'm sure would be in vital to that company.
Was and so what work you mentioned, you of course touched on a couple of things there, but what other projects are you currently involved with? 'Cause I know you're very busy. And yeah, and so what's in the pipeline for the coming year, the coming months?
So one of the projects that I'm doing is called Attenborough's Animals and Accessible Adventure. And the concept is all the animals and all the species named after the legend that is Sir David Attenborough. So I'm going around the world to try and find every single species. Now, when I first looked at this, there was about 40 species. There's now about 50 plus species. And I'm sure, you know, more and more scientists and researchers will keep on adding to the list, which is fantastic because obviously I'll get to do more of this stuff. But I had the great honour of writing a letter to Sir David about my idea. And I remember sending it on the Monday and he responded by the Friday and he was incredibly humbled by it. And he was more than happy for me to go and do this. And he said, enjoy it, have a fantastic time. So, because growing up watching Sir David Attenborough's documentaries, I used to find it so romantic and so cool and fascinating that it'd be in Africa in one clip and the next they'd be in Asia talking about something else. And it was just this flow through the continents and around the globe. I just really wanted to go on my own adventures and experience this fantastic natural world that we have. And obviously, living with a disability with club feet, it was difficult to go and keep doing these things. So now that I've got my prosthetic leg and I'm able to sort of do a lot more things, I'm hoping traveling the world and doing this will be a lot easier to find all these species. Because I was going to do this idea like 5-10 years ago, but I think with my club foot at the time, I don't think I'd be able to do it. But I've already filmed the first one, and it's called Attenborough, and it's a 170 million year old marine reptile that was found on the Jurassic Coast in Charmouth. So I went down and filmed in Dorset. I filmed at Charmouth Museum, Lyme Regis Museum, and I also got to film the actual fossil. Well, it's not the actual fossil; it's the cast of the fossil because the fossil got bombed in the Bristol Museum during World War II. But luckily they made the cast of it, and the cast is in the Natural History Museum in London. So I went to film that there, which is just phenomenal, absolutely fantastic. And I launched the first film on Attenborough's 100th birthday on the 8th of May. And on that night time, and I still pinch myself to this day, I actually attended his 100th birthday party at the Royal Albert Hall. I've never cried so much in my life. It was absolutely fantastic. Seeing the Prince of Wales deliver a message about his legacy and his fantastic career, and seeing people like Chris Packham and Steve Baxwell talking about how they've been influenced by Sir David, and then even getting to sing "Happy Birthday" to David Attenborough was just honestly, I can't describe it enough. It was just fantastic. So this project is one of these where, yeah, okay, I'll probably end up doing maybe one or two a year. But I think when it comes to the global sort of side, because there's 4 in the UK, so I've done the first one. Then next year's the Brecon Beacons. Then there's one in where Attenborough grew up in Leicester, and then the other one is a fungus in Northern Ireland. So I'm not too sure how to film a fungus, but I'm sure I'll find a way. And then the other projects is another one called Wild West Midlands. So it's not my idea; it's Adam's idea, the chap I'm filming with. And basically, I'm a Yam Yam, so I'm from Wolverhampton. That's my accent. And he's a Brummie, so he's from Birmingham. And we are traveling around the West Midlands to find all these fantastic nature reserves and parks, stuff like that, to film and document all the species that are there, and also talk about the history of each area. So, like Dudley, Wolverhampton, Birmingham, and so on. But we want to try and bring a new sort of presenting style. So the only sort of person from Birmingham or the West Midlands that did this was Bill who sadly passed away a couple of days ago. And he was fantastic in the sense of he would bring this comedic effect through and use his sort of accent in a way that really engaged audiences. But there's never really been anyone from I don't think anyway, directly from the West Midlands who's been a wildlife presenter. So I'm hoping to be sort of one of the first in that. And we want to work together in the sense of trying to bring that dialect back. So we are actually working with Wolverhampton University, and they are collating a dictionary of all the old Black Country words like Boston and eight and all that sort of stuff. We'll be using those in our films. And the first film we did was at Smethstow Valley Nature Reserve, which is on basically an old railroad track, and they've converted it into a nature reserve. Absolutely fantastic place. And in there, we found a moth, and basically in the Black Country, people used to call moths as bob howlers. So it's nothing to do with the names of the species. Obviously, you'll have like your elephant hawk moths and all those sort of things. But the actual name for a moth in the Black Country is a bob howler. So we try to use those sort of words, and we try and bring this comedic and funny effect through by using those words. And yeah, really showcasing that the West Midlands is not just this industrialized area that a lot of people think it is. It's actually full of green spaces, green corridors. It's full of canals and rivers. It's not just this smog concrete jungle that people believe it still is. In actual fact, it's actually really, really green, and we've got so many wonderful hidden gems. Because the second place we're filming at is Penderford Mill Nature Reserve, and we were filming there yesterday with BBC Midlands Today, so they came to film us. And then we're hopefully going into the studio, I think, on the 20th of August to talk more about it, and to talk about my Attenborough's animals as well, and the other projects that me and Adam are doing. But yeah, it was just a fantastic day to showcase to the BBC what we have to offer here in the West Midlands, and we got to show them the whole reserve, walk around and stuff like that, and they really, really enjoyed it, and we enjoyed it as well. So yeah, so those are the two projects that I'm doing. There's loads others that I've got in mind and trying to do, like the animals with disabilities. I'm also trying to do films where I'm going to film. So I'm going to go and film with established wildlife presenters, and film them as well, and try and work with them and see what it takes to be a wildlife presenter, because there's not actually any sort of documentational films out there that showcase the way into this sort of industry. It's sort of like a hidden world. Like, you don't really actually know how to become a wildlife presenter. Although I'm not an established one, I want to obviously become an established one. So I want to learn from the experts that are already doing it on how to achieve this, and sort of, yeah, my main aim is to become the first wildlife presenter born with club feet and now with a prosthetic limb. And again, to your audience, to showcase that people with disabilities can front wildlife programs. If you've got that passion, if you've got that knowledge, that understanding, that belief that you can do these things, then by all means, go and do it.
Finally, Ryan, where can people find you to support you and just follow your work?
I try and keep it as simple as possible. If you literally just type my name either into Google or Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, LinkedIn, Ryan Eddowes, I should pop up.
Ryan, thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Thank you.